You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 272, Papa Roach, hosted by Dan Terry.
Isn't that weird? Super weird, right?
And Joseph Wren. Did you just call Papa Roach a hair metal band?
No, I didn't. I said 80s rock. Okay? I literally would have just said hair metal band.
Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you're still swinging between angels and insects, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. New Metal May 2022 continues. The head charge is over. Now we're talking about an infestation.
Yeah, you know, American Head Charge was really, really cool. And it was a band that I underestimated, and they were actually better than I had anticipated that they were going to be. Kind of a surprise for me. This episode's not going to be like that. Just fair warning, if you are a hardcore Papa Roach fan, you might want to take what we say with a massive salt lick of salt, because that's how Jacoby would describe it, as a massive salt lick of salt.
Dave Buckner's the man. I don't know what you're talking about.
Drums aside, I don't have a lot of complaints about the music. I don't even have complaints about the vocals, to be honest. It's just the content of the vocals that kind of disturbed me a little bit, and not like in a good way, not like in a gore grind, carcass, Cannibal Corpse kind of way. This is just kind of like, you ever listen to an album and you feel like you're being talked down to? That's kind of how I feel listening to Papa Roach.
If Jeff was here, he would say,
hey, y'all,
you need to enjoy the music more and not pay attention to the vocals. Here's the thing. Dan is a vocal guy. Dan is a lyric guy. His definition of a good listening experience involves opening the vinyl or opening the linear notes and actually reading the lyrics out of the record, because that's where they should be. If Dan says there's something wrong with it, I'm inclined to believe him.
My opinion on lyrics and music, everybody says, I don't listen to the lyrics. Okay, great. You go to the movies and, put earplugs in it and don't listen to the soundtrack of the movie?
No, dude, I watched the movie, and when Optimus Prime takes a missile to the chest, I watch the explosion, feel the boom, and everything is good.
I mean, that's cool, I guess, if that's how you want to live your life. But, yeah, speaking of living your life, I don't want to dedicate too much more of mine to Papa Roach. So, let's just do all the things that we do at the top of this episode and get into it.
Well, before Dan steps on the gas and mows down the enemy, I'm going to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. So if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. And now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
We do enjoy getting reviewed on this podcast. Every time you leave us a written review, we read it on the show. So definitely make sure to be tapping that if you want to hear, us read what you said. I mean, that's one of the best ways to do it. One of the other best ways to get us to read what you said, if you would like to sponsor an episode of the podcast, hit us up at danandjoeshow@gmail.com, and we will talk about what needs to happen for us to read what you have said. Speaking of what you have said, you can also join our Discord server, because we'll read what you said on there too. Or, if you comment on an episode on social media and we see it, so, make sure to tag us and stuff like that. Or, just comment under an announcement of a new episode. But over on Discord, Tantalized Funyuns had to say,
best name ever.
Listen to the Symphony X episode. Gotta say, I absolutely agree with the complaints on the synths, at least as far as Pre-Odyssey is concerned. So much that I've only listened to 5 out of those albums. Is 5 one of the albums? I wasn't on that episode. I was on vacation. Because I just can't stand the way they sound. Starting from Odyssey, though, I don't quite mind them as much. I'd go as far as to call them charming in that particular record. And if you want what's, in my opinion, their best piano work, Awakening off of the Odyssey has some downright gorgeous piano. That song is up there for my favorite SX track, Symphony X. See, I know the slang.
You're learning your abbreviations today, Dan.
I'm learning all about Symphony X. Actually, I knew nothing about that band. I would not have picked them to talk about. It was a good time for Joe to sweep in with our good boys Brian and John Drake, both from Talking Into Infinity. They did an awesome job. I appreciate that you did have to, pull two guys in to replace me. I mean, I get it. Totally understandable.
It was an aesthetic choice.
Oh, that hurts my feelings. Anyway, yeah. So keep commenting, keep subscribing, keep sending us emails. We love to hear from you guys. Let us know if you think we're awesome. Let us know if you think we suck. If you think we suck, be intelligent about it, please. Don't be like Jacoby Shaddix and be unintelligent about it.
Wow, dude, you're starting off early. I don't know if I want to get into this now or if I just want to pull the trigger and see where we end up in the next 45 minutes.
Look, I don't think that Jacoby's a bad guy. I'm sure he's very nice to talk to. I'm sure he's never going to want to talk to me after this episode, but it is what it is, man. I'm just going by the lyrics. And also keep in mind, let's just balance this out right now. I have sold in my lifetime a combined total of 236 records. Not 236,000, just 236. So Jacoby sold more than that, so keep that in mind during the following criticism. It does bring new life to those who cannot criticize on the internet.
So Dan, tell me and the listeners all about Papa Roach.
Papa Roach is an American rock band. Yeah, you'll notice I didn't say new metal band because they were only new metal for about 4 minutes. Actually, most of their early career, before you'd ever heard of the band, they were straight up new metal, like for sure. They are from Vacaville, California. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Formed in 1993. The original lineup consisted of lead vocalist Jacoby Shaddix, guitarist Jerry Horton, drummer Dave Buckner,
the man,
bassist Will James, and trombonist Ben Luther. Now, I don't remember hearing much trombone in the band, but hats off to you, Ben. You were the trombonist in Papa Roach. So
unless somebody can tell me otherwise, that must have been the guy who has to go get beer, and they just gave him a title so he could get into the venue as part of the band.
Well, it's weird because I'm looking at a picture of the band on stage. I do not see a trombonist on stage, so he must be out getting beer. It is what it is. Here's the thing. Papa Roach put out an independent record back in good old, 1997? I'm going to go with 1997.
That's what my number says.
The record is called Old Friends from Young Years. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this album because it sucks. It was the independent release by the band. It is a combination of rap metal, a little bit of funk. If there's a trombone on it, I don't hear it. I wasn't paying that much attention to it. This is actually the album that the band sort of shopped around to labels, trying to get some notoriety during that time. They even they toured with bands like Incubus, Powerman 5000, Head PE, Snot, and Static X. So more on Static X in the next episode. But, I do think that this was them really giving it a go, man. This was them trying really hard. It is admirable that they self-produced a record, that's kind of unheard of at that time. I just don't think that the songs on it are strong at all. There's absolutely nothing in this that screams anything other than a semi-professional demo. And I even think in this particular case, the band would agree. It just doesn't hit that hard. Sorry if it's a favorite of yours, but I think most people are going to be familiar with the band's major label debut, which was called Infest.
I am not going to pretend for 1 second that I knew Papa Roach before 2000's Infest. I heard the singles, and they were really fucking cool. You hear Broken Home. You hear Between Angels and Insects. You hear Last Resort. You try to figure out as a guitarist what combination of effects you have to mix together to play the intro of Broken Home correctly. Because yes, people on the internet at the time and your friends in class, they all thought there was the right way to do it, and it was that simple. It was a fun listen. I remember I loved the riffs. The vocals made sense because the band was presented a certain way. We're going to talk about that in a second. But 1997's Old Friends from Young Years, this is a band who got together, played songs, and recorded them one day. Congratulations. That's what every band should have the ability to do. So props to them for doing it in 97. I hear the skeleton of the Papa Roach we would receive in a few years. More from the instruments.
The exoskeleton?
More from the music and less from the vocals because it's 97. Everybody sang the best they could without any real training at the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's pretty accurate. I mean, it's not like John Davis was some sort of classically trained vocalist. He made the fun sound with his mouth.
I could see the band behind this fitting in with those late 90s bands you mentioned, but that's not where the money is, guys. Your independent release from 97 is only going to get you through the door. It's going to get you on stage. You're going to be performing in front of however many people have bought tickets to that show. We're here to talk about Papa Roach because 2000, they put out a record called Infest. A record that starts with your stereotypical quiet, followed by get loud and just punk rock over the top of everyone. But this isn't punk rock. This is hard rock with a little bit of hip-hop influence. So it fit right in with your new metal classics at that time.
It definitely fit in. I would argue even that even on this record, they were not really new metal. There were new metal elements to certain songs. And honestly, if I had been as familiar with the Papa Roach discography as I am today, whenever we put this band on the schedule, I would not have... we probably still would have talked about him, but we probably wouldn't have talked about him specifically in May. You know, I try to keep that month as pure new metal as possible. But, you know, honestly, Joe, I know you like Infest, but I'm just going to get it over with, man. I don't understand why everybody loves this record so much. And it's not me being gatekeepy. I listened to this one probably more times because, like, I kind of knew I didn't like the other ones. You know what I mean? Like, after listening to them for a couple times, and I'd finish listening to Infest, and I'd be all like, why did I like that? Like, this is supposed to be the classic arc of a band where their first two records are the absolute best, and then they slowly got terrible over time, and then they either made a comeback or they didn't, right? That's like every episode of Discography Discussion, you know, in a nutshell. But with Infest, even right off the bat, I was already kind of put in a sour mood. Number one, by just how paper mache heavy the record is. What I mean is this is not your, like, 7-string guitar down-tuned, you know, new metal that I was kind of expecting or remembering. And, you know, they start off with Infest, right? Like, they start off with the title track. Oh, and get used to that whole, like, oh, it's going to start quiet, but it's totally going to get loud thing, because it happens on, like, almost every record.
It's a Papa Roach staple.
Even into the 2020s. But, you know, whenever dude jumps up and starts saying stuff, so he tricks me out a little bit, because he starts off saying, my name's Kobe Dick, Mr. Dick if you're nasty, rock a mic with a voice that's raspy.
He listened to a Janet Jackson song once then.
Yeah, and I'm poetic in my operations. My God-given talent is to rock all the nation. So when I hear something like that, I'm like, okay. So this guy is eccentric. You know, he's kind of funny, you know, interesting making that Janet Jackson reference, you know. But this is going to be wild. This ride that we're about to go on is going to be wild. But then, you know, I get further into the song and the guy's just very, like, I don't know, like loading it with suicide references, but in a way that somebody that actually was going to commit suicide would not be, you know, would not, if you're thinking about killing yourself, you know, Infest is the theory of my manifesto. Push your wig back with my lyrical pistol. Blow now, Papa Roach is on your mental. Okay, so they're blowing our minds, right? But he's using all, you know, banging like your headpiece, cock back, you know, I don't know, man. It just, I know he's not talking about suicide yet. He will get into it. There's definitely a song dedicated just to that topic, which I'll get into in a second. But it's the chorus of Infest that really, really irritates me. We're going to infest. We're getting in your head. What's wrong with the world today? The government, the media, or your family? I've wafted, these lyrics into my brain several times over in the past week, and it just comes like on one side, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of problems with the world today. It doesn't matter what it is, there are problems. But it also reeks heavily of like a board of directors wrote these lyrics. Like, we need to reach as much of a demographic as humanly possible, meaning that like we're going to make sure that if you have a problem with the world, that if it's the government, we'll have a problem with the government. If it's the media, we also have a problem with the media. If it's your family, we also have a problem with your family. It's very try-hard, and it bugs me. It's their first album, and yes, pun definitely intended. It absolutely bugs me. And I don't know. Whenever we move right into probably the band's biggest song, probably the only reason really anybody even clicked on this episode, with Last Resort coming in, cut my life into pieces. You guys all know the song. But it's like, this is my last resort, suffocation, no breathing. Yeah, like okay, Jacoby, we know what suffocation means. We don't think you're talking about the band. We know that it's because this is your last resort. You're losing your sight, you're losing your mind. I can't figure out whether or not you're planning on slitting your wrists or suffocating yourself. No breathing.
Give him a break, dude. You know personally that redundancy is the foundation of a good heavy song.
I don't know. Whatever. Okay, yeah, redundancy fine, but like my problem with Papa Roach, and this is going to be a recurring thing. The guy never talks about anything specific. It is always a general overview of topics. And I have to give him a little bit of credit in the sense that I don't know very many other bands that do that. The only one that I can think of is like Stained, but like a lot of his stuff was like very obviously deeply personal. But once Stained hit it big, it's like, to my mother, to my father, it's your son, or it's your daughter, right? Like, but like even in that song, it didn't seem quite as obvious pandering to as many people as possible. I don't know. It just as somebody that has struggled with suicidal thoughts before, it just didn't feel real. It didn't feel legitimate. I've listened to a lot of songs about suicide, and I can tell like who's doing it for the shock value of talking about suicide and who's actually like coming from a real place. And and I could be totally off base with this. Jacoby could be like, "Oh yeah, man, this was definitely like about something really serious." But like, I guess my criticism is just that like be more specific. Give us those details, and really go in and own it. But instead, you've taken a deeply personal song and it's become basically your band's anthem, the thing that your band is known for. And I'm already kind of like getting irritated about it this early in the discography, because it's not going to get better.
Do you think he is being sincere and he's choosing to write the lyrics this way because it opens the idea up to people that aren't thinking about it, and still reminds people that are thinking about it that they're not alone? Now it's the Papa Roach community and everybody's in on the feeling? Or is it just, I need to write a rock song, I need to be heavy, this is my idea? Since I don't really know what this topic is about, I'm going to use the words that I do know. And in the end, you've written a general song, a general summary, and you haven't really been specific enough for people that have those thoughts and opinions and feelings to take you serious. Because he's the lead vocalist. His job is to be the positive influence at the front of the stage that takes your attention and make sure that the audience is having a good time, right?
I mean, I guess. I don't know. Like, I kind of come from a place where, like, I never felt as a singer that I needed to, like, be positive just for the sake of everyone having a good time. Granted, I've sold 236 records, and, obviously Papa Roach has sold quite a few more than that. and continues to sell quite a few more than that. It's just, and I don't necessarily think this is a problem with Papa Roach, but like, it was the first time that I was aware in nu metal that like, it was the first time that like I got this feeling in my head that like, okay, this is specifically trying to appeal to me and my friends in our age group. I didn't necessarily feel that way about Korn. I certainly didn't feel that way about Sepultura or Soulfly, and I didn't feel that way about Power Man. I'm not sure what they had going on. And I didn't feel that way about Static X. I didn't feel that way about Slipknot, although Slipknot comes a little close in a few places for sure. But I mean, even then, I don't know. It's because I'm sure people are going to be like, there's lots of bands that you listen to. What about the fact that you like Christian rock? And isn't that specifically tailored to appeal to a certain demographic of people?
I see what you're saying. You're talking about New Release Tuesday, when you could buy all of the carbon copy nu metal bands CDs for $7 a piece at a specific retailer that was close to us geographically, and then you get the fake whispered vocals. Not going to name names. Because this whole celebration of nu metal is in honor of the Roach Coach, and they spoke very highly of that band. My point being, this is when it stops feeling like we're a heavy band with actual emotions that we want to be heavy about and be punk rock and be intense and have some groove. This is when you hear the corporation step in and say, we can make money on this. We just have to find the right kind of guys that play the right kind of music, that look a certain way, that we can dress up and they look nu metal and stand in front of everybody. And now everyone's excited because Papa Roach is here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in the first record, it was the independent record, it was nu metal because they wanted to. This record doesn't necessarily feel, and as we're going to find out, this is not really what Papa Roach sounds like. We're not going to get the real Papa Roach until the next album, you know? And that's one of my biggest gripes with this record. I do think that the songs, since we're technically here to talk about music, I think that the songs flow really, really well, but they're also very, like, even musically, they seem very tailored to a very specific sound. Because I largely feel the same way that I feel about Linkin Park. Except for, I mean, at this point, there's no reason to sit there and try to have an argument as to whether Chester meant it or not. Obviously, he meant something, like it's like they did a better job sort of catering with Linkin Park. And I almost feel like with Papa Roach, it was sort of the first shot at that, the first attempt at that sort of audience catering. And I think largely as the demographic at the time that was catered to, I remember really liking Between Angels and Insects, and that one was not even like necessarily it was targeted at me. I mean, like, it worked. I was like, yeah, man, I don't care about money. I don't care about possessions. I don't need that. Yeah, these guys get it. But that in the context of the rest of the record, it's like, it's almost like they took a poll of things that are irritating teenagers today, and they wrote a whole album of that. Pretty smart, actually.
Papa Roach is nu metal-esque on this album. They're not the same kind of heavy as Korn, Limp Bizkit, Deftones, but they're interesting and entertaining, and they have an energy, especially for aspiring musicians. And I think what makes this band work the most in the beginning is the guitars, is the bass, is the drums. I said it earlier, Dave Buckner, he is the man. There are aspects of the upcoming albums, no matter how much you might like or dislike them, that don't feel producer time-aligned crazy. If you tried to time-align Chad Kent tomorrow, I'm calling bullshit. That doesn't work. Dave Buckner, he has a feel and a groove that I really do think pull this band forward and give some legitimacy to what otherwise is a heavily produced product. There is an aspect of this record that, no matter how sincere it is, a producer touched it in 2000 and said, this is how we're going to make more money. This is how we're going to sell all the albums and how you guys are going to be successful for the next 20 plus years. Then Love, Hate, Tragedy comes out. Dan, do you remember when Papa Roach had one record, and it was really good. It was called Infest, and we all listened to it, and we liked it. And then Love, Hate, Tragedy was coming out, and we were excited.
I mean, no, to some of those statements. I don't remember, like, loving Infest. I know what you're trying to say here, but I'm being a little hard to get along with tonight.
When you put out an album that has an A-side that cannot fail musically, Love, Hate, Tragedy has expectations. You know what I expect Love, Hate, Tragedy to do? Have the dissonant feeling riffs that Infest does, because don't get me wrong, that album is not dissonant. It's a rock record. All that stuff Dan said about the last record and being upset with the vocals.
Wasn't upset with the vocals. I was upset with the lyrics.
All those things that Dan said about the last album and being upset with the lyrics, I officially agree when we get to She Loves Me Not. And I agreed back in 2002, if you remember. We're listening to this album. It starts off feeling way more positive, way more 2002, way less 2000. That's fine. I'm not going to pick on the album for being positive because, yes, positivity is okay sometimes. When you start the song off by rhyming eyes with eyes 4 times, take another shot at those lyrics, dude, because you're not even rhyming. You're repeating yourself. And it's not ironic sounding. It's not clever. It actually sounds like they put a microphone in his hand, like Bob Rock did to James Hetfield in that movie once, and said, just make it up, dude. Let's just do something. Just go. We'll create something new. When I see her eyes look into my eyes, then I realize, okay, that's clever. Well, I close my eyes. Dude, stop saying eyes. And yes, it upset me that much because if you listen to Infest, it's clever sometimes. It's clever more than it's not clever. And we're on album number 2 in my eyes. See what I did there?
Well, we can pull the veil off now because Love, Hate, Tragedy is what Papa Roach actually sounds like, right? Like Infest, I was complaining the entire time that it didn't quite feel sincere. It didn't feel kind of quite like what these guys wanted to do, I guess the only way to really know that is if I was in Papa Roach, which I was not. I think that Love, Hate, Tragedy is a more sincere record than Infest, but it's 4% more sincere. They're still doing sort of the same things they were doing before. This is also the first example I see really of Jacoby's lyrics being very, very fixated on the idea of positive, negative. Love, hate, tragedy. He's always like, let's go polar opposite. What is the opposite of the word that I just said? Okay. And yeah, obviously, She Loves Me Not is definitely literally one of the dumbest songs I've ever heard in my life.
Life is a bowl of jams, dude. I don't care what anybody says.
I mean, it's fine. She Loves Me Not is just really bad, but some of the other ones are okay. The song Love, Hate, Tragedy is all right. I can kind of get more down on the idea of this band being all about the catchy melodic chorus. I do think that Love, Hate, Tragedy does ape Creep by Radiohead just a little bit in places. Like they Papa Roach it up. It's not a direct ripoff, but I get a little bit of a vibe of Creep from Radiohead on that one. But anyway, yeah. So this is Papa Roach as the rock band. Papa Roach, definitely more minimal with the screams and the quote unquote heavy riffs and all of that. It's all sort of, it's the perfect follow up to Infest because it's not different enough to drive fans away, but it's a subtle change and it's musically a bit more complex, a little bit more thought out. And so I don't listen to this. I don't get angry the whole time I'm listening to it. Part of that is because if you pay too much attention to the lyrics, you're going to get irritated. And I'm just not really, I'm trying to be positive. I really am. But these are basically just relationship songs. Just rock band, hard rock relationship songs. And it's fine because people relate to relationship songs. And that's not something that's going to go away. I don't know if everything that dude writes about is a specific relationship. He does have a problem with being specific.
That's Puddle of Mud, dude.
Okay, well, it's also okay, but it's also Papa Roach. You know, it's either all about one specific relationship or this guy dates around a lot and it doesn't ever seem to end well. As a matter of fact, it seems like every single time he gets in a relationship, she's the problem and not him. Isn't that weird? Super weird, right?
I talked about Dave Buckner and his very solid, outstanding drumming on the last album. I didn't mention Jerry and I didn't mention Tobin. It's a rock guitar tone, but the way that dude plays, he puts notes together that sound like the year 2000, the year 2002 to me. And I love it because it is that time in heavy music where everyone that didn't do the nu metal thing was trying to figure out how to add those dissonant tones and expand those power chords in a way, but you didn't know exactly how to make that work. So when I'm listening to these songs, I'm hearing guys that played those notes differently for the first time, and it sounded cool, and it worked, and it's the Papa Roach sound to me. When you have Dave, Jerry, and Tobin together, that's the reason I listened to this band in the year 2002. It's for those three musicians. I'm not a big fan of Jacoby's style, and he has a style starting on the last album. Generally, it's melodic, hip-hop. Melodic, hip-hop. You can move those aspects into different positions in the song. You can have an entire song that's melodic and have no hip-hop. You can have a song that's primarily hip-hop, but he sticks to that pretty singularly. It's not a Fred Durst thing. It very much sounds like a producer wrote it down on paper, and it's a formula that somebody figured out, and it works for them, and it's not going away at all.
Nope, it's going to be that way. There's a little bit of screams thrown in there. Every now and again, he still gets angry and screams it out, which the meathead in me appreciates to a certain degree. I don't really have much of a problem with this record. I mean, it's not my favorite. Obviously, if you listen to this podcast, you know it's not really my style, but it is their style, and it is the truer sense of their style out of what we've heard so far. But I mean, at this point, these guys have become one of the biggest bands in the world, to the point where I believe that they could probably murder someone and get away with it.
2004, Getting Away with Murder.
Oh boy.
The singles brought the angry fan, former fan at the time, me, back to the band. I bought the album. It's okay. It is 100% the radio rock third mainstream release by Papa Roach. I'm not going to write home about it. I'm not going to tell you it's the definitive Papa Roach. But those three guys I keep talking about, they have some killer grooves on this one. And the title track, Getting Away with Murder, stands out for me as one of the definitive Papa Roach songs. I think for most people, the A side of Infest is Papa Roach. I think Getting Away with Murder definitively breaks that argument.
I think this is more Papa Roach than Infest. Like I said, Love, Hate, Tragedy is kind of the first preview of what is to come. Getting Away with Murder is them sort of just continuing on in that fashion, but they are mixing a little bit more of the heavy rock of Infest kind of back into this a little bit more. Maybe it was to bring fans back in, right? Because I feel like the A side of this record definitely, or at least the first four songs or so, right before Getting Away with Murder, I think that sounds just like more Love, Hate, Tragedy to me. But Getting Away with Murder sounds much different than the rest of the record. It's kind of the definition of I bought the record based on this song, and then none of the other songs on the record really sound like this.
Don't you hate popular music tropes from the early 2000s, Dan?
Sometimes, yeah. Especially in this case, because I actually really like the song Getting Away with Murder. It's probably one of the catchiest Papa Roach songs I've ever heard. And I mean, that chorus is undeniably catchy and sticks with you. I don't think that the lyrics are stupid here. I actually really, really, really love it in a. It's weird too because I love it in a '90s sort of way. You know, I mean, granted, like I definitely feel like there's still a lot of tropes here. You know, be free ending with sick and tired of being sick and tired. It's just. I mean, even that year, like, come on, man. Like, that's just... When I took writing classes, I sort of just, like, I was told to avoid cliche at all costs. And so it bugs me when it's this obvious. But again, I didn't
This is radio rock,
lyrics.
dude. Cliches are all the rage.
I know. I think that's the biggest thing with Papa Roach. Is I think musically, they've kind of got it figured out. As far as obviously these guys can write a hit single, which is something that most people cannot do. Like you add up there's the rock bands that you've heard about, and then there's all of the other ones that are trying to be the rock band that you've heard about, you know. And these guys do it effortlessly. 3 records in, they are at the absolute top of their game. And so for a guy that's into metal like me, yeah, I'm not gonna really love it because it's not heavy, or whatever. But I can't deny that this is probably their best album.
Am I wrong saying that Scars does not sound like Papa Roach? It sounds like they were sampling a Jacoby solo project, and that's what it would have sounded like had they gone in that direction.
Actually, the Jacoby solo project was a post-hardcore band, believe it or not. That was kind of interesting to find out that, it was right around this time. Jacoby went into the studio and recorded I don't know if he recorded a full-length album or not. I know they were recording, but he was in a band called Fight the Sky that was a post-hardcore band. And I guess he was trying to just show off like the heavier side of his vocals, And so I actually probably would have been kind of interested in hearing that. But they were supposedly started recording in 2004, and either they're still recording or more likely they just gave up on the project because, Papa Roach is probably a pretty intense full-time job, especially in 2004. But yeah, I don't think Scars sounds like Papa Roach. Well, that's not true. It depends on what era of Papa Roach you're talking about, because when we start getting into those like post 2010 records, it definitely sounds like them then.
2006, the Paramore sessions.
Oh boy, not to be confused with the band Paramore. That just they didn't sit down and record an album with Paramore. Just letting you know. It's for your own.
Early
for your
2000s new metal trope, by the way. Track 2, Alive. Give this band a point.
Yeah, but this Alive isn't as good as the one that you've probably heard. It's alive and out of control, Joe. It's out of control. It's rebellious. It's into it. I was actually kind of surprised by this one whenever I first started playing it because it starts off kind of like old Papa Roach. Like it's got the kind of like, I'm never gonna call what he's doing rapping, but it is the thing that he does that people would commonly associate with him rapping.
You know what it does sound like, though? All those bands you said the original Papa Roach used to play shows with. Because when you start doing that punk-influenced hard rock with palm mutes and that's a late 90s heavy thing. I can't call it thrash. I can't call it punk. I can't call it any of those
aggressive
words
hard rock
because
really
aggressive is the right word. It's just something that those bands did, and to hear Papa Roach go in that direction at a time when this is 2006, I don't need to repeat what was gaining popularity in 2006, but for me, Papa Roach was not the band most people were listening to. That's why this one snuck past me. I didn't hear this for a good 10 years. And I'm a little upset that I haven't heard it up until 6 years ago, because this is way better than the last 2 albums, in my opinion. It's still Papa Roach doing their radio rock thing, but the record is more entertaining. The music is more entertaining. Everything about this has a better energy to my ears.
So this is kind of a double-edged sword for me, because on one hand, I think the record is passably decent. You know, you can kind of bob your head to it. And I've always been curious about what happened to these types of bands after I got into metalcore and basically just stopped listening to the radio. And, you know, I was kind of like, whatever happened to all those guys? You know, part of why we do this show, so I can kind of get caught up on some things, you know, and this is something I didn't necessarily need to be caught up on. But yeah, I was just always interested, like what happened to Papa Roach after Infest, right? Like, and I was pleasantly surprised by the heaviness and aggression of this one. But I also feel as the record goes on that the band kind of like is starting to a little bit lose their Papa Roachness. Like if let's say that if Infest is like their original sound, they're kind of starting to move away from that in a way that the songs stop having their own recognizable sort of guitar tone. There's a certain vibe that Papa Roach used to give off that isn't really on this record. They're kind of just starting to blend more with mainstream rock overall. But in my opinion, I think this is not the right way to go because they helped define mainstream rock just a few years ago with their own personal brand of stuff. But now everything is getting so like verse, chorus, verse. You know, it's a little bit jarring in my opinion, because I kind of thought this band sort of had their own sound. But like, I don't know, when you get to a song like "What Do You Do," you're like, am I still listening to Papa Roach? You know, when I was a teenager, I wanted to also cut my life into pieces, and it was also my last resort. What happened to that band? That band's actually been gone for a little while now.
They make an appearance every now and then. And 2009's Metamorphosis is not one of those times.
Oh, also, real quick mention, My Heart is a Fist, living the dead life, because we gotta always have an opposite, positive, negative. But yeah, it's fine. Let's morph. It's morphin' time. So the record starts off, really quiet.
And it builds up with some clapping. I can hear that in the background. There's a cool snare roll going on. The guitar is layering some rhythmic, dissonant-esque chords. I feel like we're reminding everyone off the bat that we're still Papa Roach, but I'm worried that it's not going to pay off, Dan.
It's not going to pay off great. I mean, they did have Hollywood Horror on this one. I remember that song having a video and seemed to have done relatively well for them. But at this point, they're starting to sort of embrace that, like, I don't even necessarily think this is like mainstream rock. It's starting to sound kind of like, it's kind of starting to sound like 80s rock. Like, does anybody else feel like Jacoby
you just
is
call
like
Papa Roach a hair metal band?
No, I didn't. I said 80s rock. Okay. I literally would have just said hair metal band if that's what I meant. No, I don't think it's that. I feel like Jacoby is channeling Axl Rose really hard on this record. And it bothers me a little bit. Especially like songs like I Almost Told You That I Loved You. Tell me that doesn't sound like something Axl Rose would have wrote. And then listen to the vocals. Listen to the way that he enunciates.
Is there a piano in this scenario?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, you can't go full Axl Rose without a piano. You know that, right?
I mean, I guess.
I don't know. Hear alternative rock radio in 2009, if alternative rock radio is a thing that actually exists. It's that sound. You've heard this Papa Roach. You've been listening to this Papa Roach for at least the last 15 years. I feel like half this album eventually became the opening track for a WWE pay-per-view and or weekly television show, because it did.
See, I disagree. I disagree with you. I don't think this is the same Papa Roach we've been hearing. It's kind of what I was hinting at on the last record. I feel like they're completely unrecognizable as Papa Roach here. Like, I don't think they sound like themselves at all.
This is that weird time for me where Papa Roach sounds like that radio band with Jacoby's voice. Other times it sounds like those three musicians and a guy who is Jacoby more than 80% of the time. So for me, it all runs together. I agree with you. This one starts off different, but it's all still there. They're just mixing it a little bit differently.
Yeah, this is just weird to me. I don't know. I did not really care for this one. If you want to see why I didn't care for this one, see our entire episode about Guns N' Roses. I don't. That's just not my thing, and it's fine. They didn't write it for me. But I am curious as to who they did write it for. Specifically. So just hit me up, danandjoeshow@gmail.com. Let me know who it's for, and I need to feel more of a connection to this music to like really feel like it's going to affect me in more of a more positive way, because you've been talking about positivity a lot here and I'm not picking up on that.
2012, The Connection, you're not going to pick up on it here either. I don't think Papa Roach is the band for Dan for at least the past 10 years, and I think this is the point in the discography where Papa Roach is trying to stay relevant. I don't blame the band for any of these negative things. They've got a producer. They've got somebody who makes sure that Papa Roach does what makes Papa Roach's money. And when I'm listening to this, I hear those decisions that found their way into mainstream popular music in 2012. We're trying to get the band that recorded Infest to sound mainstream. We're motivating them to be mainstream, but we're not adapting mainstream to what they created. I hear that guy that Head talked about in his book, who sits in the corner of the studio, who's helping you write lyrics to your songs like it's a project and not something that an artist actually puts together as a feeling that they're trying to convey to the listener. This sounds put together. It's not the first time, but this is the point where it sounds like Papa Roach is being constructed as a product. This is where it really kicks in for me. I feel like Metamorphosis, you could say that was the band trying to change. Like they got a get out of jail free card from the label. We'll give you guys one shot, but we're not going to really let you go all the way. This is where we're pulling them back in, and now we got to make money, guys.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much money Papa Roach was making in 2012. I mean, more money than me, obviously. But, yeah, I don't know. This one is even somehow... This record comes across as sounding more bland to me than even Metamorphosis was, That record at least keeps its promise of its name, that it does sound like a different Papa Roach. I don't actually think it sounds like Papa Roach at all. Although in my opinion, I feel like the band was presented as a product as far back as Infest. It was just a different kind of product, one that just happened to appeal to guys like me and you a little bit more than whatever this is. But I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, and I apologize to any Papa Roach fan right now for what I'm about to say, but there are times on this record and the next one where I'm not sure if I'm listening to Papa Roach or Skillet.
Is it time?
I mean, I guess I don't have anything else to say about this record. Like, it's just has a cool cover. I like the skeleton with the headphones and his mind's being blown. So, like, I had very high expectations on hitting play. I ignored the fact that, well, no, it doesn't even say Papa Roach on the cover, which probably would have taken away from it. But, like, I don't know, man. Like, where did the angels go? I'm getting hard Skillet vibes on that, yikes. I mean,
just
it's
hold
fine,
your breath. It's 2015. I don't know if the album is supposed to be called Fear, but they put periods after each letter, so throwback to nu metal. Why don't we give this band another point? This record is not nu metal. This record is not the weird place in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where Papa Roach was molded into this radio thing. They are still being pushed hard in all of the alternative rock stations at this time. But this is the first time in a while that the producer has a different set of tricks. It sounds like the engineer's using the new formula for this band. I can't believe I'm saying this. It sounds like Papa Roach is modern metal in 2015. And I like it a lot better than what we were getting for the past few records.
I don't know, man. This still just sounds like Skillet to me.
Oh,
like,
it absolutely does. You are not wrong in that observation or that opinion.
Never have to say goodbye. Literally, a coworker came up behind me when I was listening to this, and he was like, "Oh, is this a new Skillet song?" And I was like, "No, it's Papa Roach." And they go, "Who's Papa Roach?" And so I think that's like a little bit telling, because then of course I had to be like, cut my life into pieces. And he's like, "That's that same band." And I guess that's, yeah, it's an outsider perspective, but like it is kind of how I feel about it. Like, I don't hear the modern metal comparisons at all here. I don't
all
know.
In the production. Listen to the drums, listen to the guitars, listen to the layers, listen to the melodic piano parts that accentuate the song, accentuate the melody at times. If anything doesn't sound modern metal on this, it's Jacoby's voice. Because he has to sound like him, right?
I don't think he sounds like him. I don't think he sounded like him for a while. I like his almost slightly like deeper, like almost nasally shouting that he was doing, back when the band first started. That sounded like Jacoby Shaddix to me. This just sounds like whatever it needs to be. And I think that's kind of my issue with it, is that like it sounds so similar to the last album that like if I'm listening to them in a playlist, I don't know where the last one stopped and this one began. Now, I'm not a production guy like Joe is, so I'm not going to hear that. I'm not going to hear the crossover. But like I absolutely couldn't find anything on this record to latch back onto. The band has just been trying to recapture their popularity, because I don't know this, but I feel like during these years, the times between possibly 2006 all the way up to 2015, I bet this band was still charting, but probably not in the US.
I think it's interesting that you and I have an equal number of positive and negative feelings on these albums, but it sounds like we have a rubber band that we're pulling against each other. Like, no, I found this thing that's wrong. No, I found this thing that's wrong. I think people were eating this up, because I've heard all the songs on Fear during a random Pandora shuffle sometime in the last 7 years. And I remember more than once looking down saying, that's Papa Roach? That's that band? I'm not amazed that they sound like this, because I saw this coming years ago. I'm surprised that they're putting out this much new music every couple years. It really does feel like a production schedule, a job. It sounds like a contract is being fulfilled, but this band is making money. And I don't think there's a time where Papa Roach really stopped making money. They're still selling tickets. They're still one of the biggest bands on the card if they're not headlining the show. The most shocking thing for me to see in the 2010s was Jacoby happy on stage, because I remember when his thing was not looking happy. And I don't know if that was sincere or if that was a new lead vocalist who was getting used to the stage, but it's very strange to see someone that happy sing those Infest songs. It makes me agree with Dan. It feels less sincere to me. Now, it's been a decade or more since those songs were written, so you can't say he's in the same place mentally, but that Papa Roach formula has not changed. We're still getting that sound. It just sounds different because we have a different production toolbox. It has to sound like this if we're going to play it on the radio next to that other thing that sounds like this. It's like Papa Roach begat Skillet, and Skillet begat everybody.
Well, I was just going to say that if the band sounds like Skillet, it's more likely that Skillet sounds like this. More so. Just if you look at how long Papa Roach has been around. Don't get me wrong, Skillet's been around for a very long time as well, but they did not always sound like they sound now. Much like Papa Roach. And yeah, this era of the band was the hardest for me to get through when I was listening to it, because it was just album after album of verse, chorus, verse. Every now and again they'd pull out something really cool, but for the most part it was just business as usual. Just adding 10 more songs to the hard rock canon of verse, chorus, verse songs with a guy that has a slightly gravelly voice singing over it. Somebody even asked me, they're like, oh, well, I mean, it's not as bad as Nickelback. I would argue that Nickelback is more memorable and has their own distinct identity that they've stuck with to a fault this entire time. Whereas I feel I have more respect for a band like Nickelback that sticks to their guns. Even if their guns sounded like this, their guns sounded like this day one, and they've stuck to it and innovated in their own way. I may not be a Nickelback fan, but like I don't get the hate. The band absolutely does what it says on the cover that they're going to do, With Papa Roach, I feel like when if it's 2015 and you buy a Papa Roach album, it's because you haven't heard one since Infest. And you just remember liking it, and you listen to it, and you're like, oh, okay. And I think once we roll around to 2017, they start to realize that's the people that are buying their records too.
Crooked Teeth. I started off very worried, and you know why. How many layers of Jacoby does it take to make Papa Roach sound like a modern metal band in the first 5 minutes of the album? The answer is, how many you got? It's a thing that I pick on because it's so tropey, and it became so tropey. But in 2017, it wasn't as tropey. This was the last production thing that got added to the modern metal toolbox. This feels a little more serious, a little more classic Papa Roach, but don't get me wrong, it still sounds like Papa Roach from Fear. We're not going to get a surprising turnaround to Between Angels and Insects Part 2, but we are going to let the band and Jacoby be a little more aggressive on this one. Not too aggressive, because then people on the radio won't like it, right?
Well, I think this one's really interesting, actually. I kind of perked up after almost crawling under a bed and passing away after listening to the last 3 or 4 records. This one I kind of perked up for a little bit more. And the reason for it, number one, is holy crap, it sounds different. And it sounds different in a couple of different ways. One, I feel like that's a Papa Roach lyric. It's different in different ways. But like, what I hear is them realizing that the last album that a lot of people have heard by Papa Roach, at least in the U.S., was Infest, right? So you get a little bit of there's actual like sort of like new metal tuning going on here. There's heavier riffs. Jacoby is more aggressive as a vocalist. But there's also a lot more hip-hop influence on this than there ever has been before. And a lot of like modern pop elements thrown in too. See, this is still the band that wrote those pop rock albums that they've been doing. And so there are elements of that. I will not accuse them of being a band that writes bad choruses. They write very good choruses most of the time. Like a machine. They can just pull it off. But yeah, so you've got the whoa, whoa, which I know is Joe's favorite thing in the entire world, right in the first song, and it's a choir of Jacobys going whoa, whoa. But then you get into the song Crooked Teeth, and that sounds like classic Papa Roach, like we're kind of back to that. You've got the driving rhythm. You've got the heavier riffs. You've got Jacoby sounding more like himself than he has in 4 albums. And it sounds really good. I'm actually into it a little bit. Like I could see it. But man, there is a lot of hip-hop influence on this record. And that's not going away. That's part of their sound now. It was sort of part of their sound back in Infest days, but it wasn't like it is here. This is something totally different. They did a song called Sunrise Trailer Park with Machine Gun Kelly back in 2017 when that would have still been considered cool. And it's
Wow, dude.
it's actually a fairly it's a fairly interesting song actually. But yeah, this is where they totally changed it up. And they did, because they put the dead cockroach on the cover, right? And I think honestly this might be just Papa Roach making all the decisions behind the veil this time. Like, I think this is Papa Roach like actually being allowed to do whatever they want. And it's a little unfocused. There's a lot of weird stuff on it, a lot of autotune, but it's interesting. It's actually interesting to listen to because you're not totally sure what they're going to do next. And but you also still get those choruses that you love. So if you're a huge fan of the last few albums, it's like, oh, cool. Yeah, they're back to, they're back to doing those great choruses. But then there's all this other stuff. Is it an attempt to be relevant? Probably. But it's also an attempt to cash in on nostalgia, which is not the worst decision that bands can make this late into their career.
We've been extremely negative so far, not without good reason. But if there is a point in the discography where Papa Roach starts moving uphill, I think Fear is that record. But we can both agree that Crooked Teeth is a definitive step up. Whether it's nostalgia, songwriting, creative decisions. Okay, we've done our Radio Rock 6-album run, and now we're going to do something that's more what we want to do. Whatever the reason is, it's 2017, and most people are ready to admit that those things they liked when they were younger were actually cool and never really stopped being cool. This is not nu metal, but I could see a nu metal fan getting very nostalgic listening to this album. And it's for the hip-hop reasons. It's for the groove in the drums reasons. Papa Roach is... I don't want to say they're back in full form because they have a form, and it's the radio single. But for the die-hard old-school fans, for people that bought Infest and didn't stop listening to it, you can get back on the train now. It's not perfect, but you can get back on the train now.
You can, because in typical Papa Roach fashion, they're gonna milk this new thing that they're doing for all that it's worth. You know who did this better than Papa Roach? Islander. We need to talk about Islander on Patreon sometime.
I think we can make that work. That's
right.
That's a thing that's going to happen. Spoilers if it already happened. Subscribe to Patreon. $1 gets you into that exclusive album review feed. More than $1, well, there's just more perks.
Yeah, we can't be bothered to look at a calendar, so hopefully hopefully this was clever, and you guys haven't heard our review of Islander yet.
2019. I have a question, Dan.
Yeah, what's up, buddy?
Who do you trust?
Well, Zao. You can really only trust yourself in like the first 5 Zao albums, right?
But what about the most recent albums?
Yeah, 100%. 10 out of 10.
I trust Papa Roach to put out an album that is so saturated with radio singles that I'm going to listen to it once and say, that's fine. And if it comes up on a shuffle, I might let it go. But I'm not going to buy that album. Remember all that stuff we said about Crooked Teeth? Who do you trust? I trust Papa Roach to release a carbon copy of that record. I dare say they recorded all of this at exactly the same time in the same studio with the same staff. And this is just the next batch. And props to them if that's what they did, because that is so fucking clever.
Well, I mean, Joe, this is the start of the ending. I mean, it's a positive, it's negative. It's the two things that don't mean the same thing, but you're going to use like they're part of the same sentence. It's the most Papa Roach thing ever, So, yeah, I mean, this is the last record. It's a few minutes longer than the other one. So much hip hop influence. So many just like straight like sort of rap. Okay, I can't call it. I just can't, good conscience, call it rap. So I'm just gonna keep saying R&B influence. How about that? How about rap influence? We'll just say that, right?
That is the most correct statement.
It's interesting hearing Papa Roach in 2019 still playing sort of rap rock. you know, but it's not like, and I actually like sort of his, like on the title track, Who Do You Trust? I like his like smoother, like cleaner vocal with the little bit of the like electronic auto-tune sound to it. It sounds very modern, but it also sounds a lot like we're trying to pander to a new audience, because that's all this band does, is try to find what the new thing is and kind of jump onto it and do it the best that they can. That's, again, the most Papa Roach thing ever. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed Crooked Teeth because it was kind of a shorter album. It was like 30 minutes long. It was in and out. It presented all of these ideas of like, this is the kind of thing we're going to do. But it's sort of just like a journey from parts of songs to parts of songs. All right, guys, here's the slow melodic intro. Okay, now we're going to throw in a little bit of a rap section. And then, you know, we're going to follow it up with the cleanest, smoothest Papa Roach chorus you've ever heard in your life. You know, and then we're going to go back into the rap. You know, it starts, it's like the last album was just kind of this weird birthing pain for them to get where they're at now, because that one wasn't perfect. Whereas I feel like they went through a lot of trouble to sort of make this sound perfect. But I think one of the issues I have with it is, as we keep going with these later Papa Roach records, this is starting to just sound like Jacoby and less like Papa Roach, if that makes sense. Like, I don't hear a lot of the band going on with this.
Is this a bad time to tell you that Papa Roach put out another album 2 weeks ago?
We're not done? I'm not surprised. That this is absolutely... I did listen to this. I listened to all 14 songs of it, all 43 minutes.
2022, 1 month ago from the release of this episode, approximately 2 weeks ago from the recording, Dan and I got a little more work to do, and ego trip in 2022. I don't know how to feel good about this album. It sounds a little more classic Papa Roach at times. It sounds a little more Getting Away with Murder at times. It's definitely modern, but it's not modern sounding. If this is the new decade of rock from Papa Roach, I'm kind of okay with it. But just like Panic at the Disco stopped sounding like a band a long time ago, I agree with Dan. This is the first or second time it really just sounds like Jacoby doing his Papa Roach thing, because that guy shows up everywhere on everything. I wonder where his love of music really is, because he shows up in so much hip-hop, it's not even funny. He even did vocals for The Who on a remix of one of their songs. You should check that out. It's the most metal thing you've heard Jacoby do in a long time. But this is hard rock, heavy Papa Roach. I want to meet the person who has bought all 14 albums, because I have not. I have not listened to all 14 albums prior to this week, and I don't like all 14 albums, but I like where Papa Roach is today more than I like where they spent the last 15 years.
I don't think this sounds like classic Papa Roach at all. If that's even a thing, like, they've been around so long now that, like, you could be talking about any era of the band and describe it as classic Papa Roach. But again, I don't really hear the band here. Like, you remember Fieldy's Dreams?
No.
You don't remember Fieldy's Dreams?
I refuse to remember Fieldy's Dreams in a competent way that I can discuss it on this podcast.
Well, you can't recall what you don't remember, right? That's off of Papa Roach's Always Wandering. So, you know, keep that around. Keep that in your brain. That he still got that consistency lyrically. You can't recall what I don't remember. It's a factual statement. You can't argue with it, right? It's rock solid. Anyway, yeah, this is just, I mean, I don't even know what this is, man. This like, I was kind of behind it when they were adding like a little bit more hip hop influence into their sound, but like this is just so completely off the rails and unrecognizable as Papa Roach that I don't even know what to do with it. Like, I feel like the ideal was to release all of these songs onto SoundCloud. You know, that like it was like that they're aiming for like that
You're
that
right.
demographic.
This sounds like 3 years ago. Put every track out on SoundCloud.
Yeah.
There is a disjointedness to this album.
It's just weird. But then, like, you have songs like Leave a Light On, which sound more like, I don't know, is there even a genre for this? Like adult contemporary, maybe? Like, they're striking out in so many different, like, they're striking into so many different territories that I honestly have whiplash trying to keep up with it. And, like, normally I like stuff like this. Like, not stuff specifically like this, but, like, I like the unpredictability of it. But now that they've given us 3 albums of it, I kind of thought that they'd be done after doing, like, 2 of them like this. But here it is, where it's like, what, do we want rock fans to like us? Do we want rap fans to like us? Do we want nu metal fans to like us? Do we want trap fans to like us? And that really, honestly, and this is my final thought, really sums up what Papa Roach has been about this entire time, even since Infest, is we want to appeal to as many different demographics as we possibly can, as quickly as we can, so we can rake in that cash. And they did that all the way back in 2000, all the way until 2022. We're at almost a quarter century. And for that, guys, mission accomplished. I salute you.
I think everyone loves the idea of Papa Roach being this heavy, energy-driven band that reminds you of all your nostalgic feelings from high school. There was a time where this band was presented as that nu metal band, that hard rock band. They were heavier. They were more groove-driven. They were intense. But they've always been appealing. And the longer we go on, the more appealing they are, because the popular taste of music has been morphed into what this band has done for the majority of their discography. That radio rock sound. It's hard to call it hard rock when I'm listening to Stand Up, and that's what's on the stereo right now. So the band that you remember, those people still have a job, and they've been successful, but it's not metal. And there's so much of it that I really don't like. I wonder if we're just missing something. And I don't think we are. I'd love to hear from Lauren Kozlowski and the Roach Coach on this band. If I've missed everything, if I've missed out on everything for the past 20 years, please tell me. Because what I'm hearing, it's not for me. Dan, what's your album of the week?
So I kind of forced my coworkers to listen to Papa Roach with me throughout the week. They were just as sick of it as I was, and somebody's like, you know, but one of my good friends, shout out to Matt, who sits right next to me when we work. He asked me, like, okay, if you don't like Infest, you know, what's a record from around that time that you think is better, or does what they were trying to do on Infest better than Papa Roach did on Infest? So we took a break for a palate cleanser, and we listened to Anthology by Alien Ant Farm, which is also a album that came out in 2001, but it came out around the time that Papa Roach was popular with Infest. And what you have with Alien Ant Farm is also a band that gets categorized as nu metal, but is not actually a nu metal band. They're more of an alternative rock, hard rock kind of band. And
absolutely,
the vocalist of Alien Ant Farm writes very intense, often sometimes weird, but highly emotional lyrics about a variety of topics, about a variety of specific topics. He delivers emotionally. The songs are strong. They appeal to a lot of people. And I feel like Anthology is a just absolute stronger record than Infest. And I think it's great that they're both bug records, you know, in their own way. But yeah, that's the first thing I went to when somebody was asking me, like, why do you not like Infest? And I'm like, because I like Alien Ant Farm more. I think they did it better by doing it differently.
For me, I found a band. Stop me if you've heard this one. My album of the week is Born of the Bomb by Lich King.
Oh man! So our buddy Mike that was on Discuss Metal Live last month, dude. I'm not even kidding. I'm sitting there at work, probably listening to Zayo. Let's be real. It was during my vacation. So he walks in and he's like, "Dude, you need to go listen to that new Lich King record." I'm like, I'm not listening to that. I'm gonna listen to Zayo. And he's like, "No, trust me, you need to listen to this Lich King record." I haven't listened to it yet, but I feel like I have to now.
If there's a new album in the last 5 years, I'm not aware, but this one came out in 2012, and if you read the band's mission statement, we wanted to create old school thrash. They succeeded. If I had complete singular control of the schedule, I would be penciling this band in. What does that tell you?
I mean, we definitely could. Okay, so the Lich King album what was the album that he told me to listen to? Because that one, Born of the Bomb, was from 2012, right?
Right.
Apparently, I need to catch up on my Lich King. There seems to be a lot of records. Should probably start listening now because eventually we're going to have to do that. So there we go. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I'm very thankful for you guys for sticking with us through the new metal month. I know this isn't everybody's cup of tea. And I do want to say to anybody that's a massive Papa Roach fan, we did not go into this attempting to be negative or to tear the band apart or anything like that. Just keep in mind before you comment that this is just our opinion, and we're allowed to have it just like you're allowed to have yours, and that we definitely appreciate civil discussion on these topics. So if you want to get into a civil discussion, I'm totally up for that. Also notable, is this the first time Joe has not told everybody to listen to the band in his final thoughts?
It happened.
Seriously, go back and listen to like all 200 and whatever episodes. And yeah, he almost is always like, yeah, so you should be listening to such and such band. I'm sure it's happened before, but I can't think of a time in recent memory.
Well, thank you to the listener for listening to this podcast. This was not a fun one for me, but stay tuned. Next week is going to be a lot more fun, and I'm going to get us there as quickly as I possibly can. Take us out, DFT.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening and subscribing. If you would like to reach out to us to give us band suggestions or to have a civil discussion, you can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/discography discussion. You can find us on Twitter at discussmetal and on Instagram at discussmetal. You can find us on Discord. We have our very own Discord server dedicated to this podcast. There will be a link in the show notes that'll take you right there. If you would like to sponsor an episode of this podcast, please, again, send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com, and we will see what we have to offer for you. We've got some really exciting things coming up. Make sure to stay tuned and don't change the channel.
And on that note, this has been episode 272 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion. And please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Scrooge McDuckin' through your money.
$1 a month gets you into that exclusive album review feed.
Change the channel and I'll break your fingers.
Right.